Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Cheyenne and I'm an Asian American adoptee and expat living in Brazil. I post new videos here every Tuesday and Friday about race, feminism, and pop culture, so if you're into that, please subscribe and ring the bell. So I usually don't post videos on Sundays, but I had to talk about Mulan. As an Asian American woman, it hits a bit differently, and also because it's trending and I'm a vulture. So part 1, the fetishization of the East. So it wasn't until I went to college that I realized how much white women love to fetishize the other Disney princesses. And for clarification's sake, the other Disney princesses are the original princesses of color, them being Jasmine, Pocahontas, and Mulan. White women love these princesses, and it's honestly no surprise considering how much white women love to dress up as black women, almost as much as they love to don their Jasmine Halloween costume. There was this white girl in one of my college classes that couldn't shut up about how much she loved Mulan and how she would dress up as her as a kid for every Halloween. And that's not a problem in and of itself, but the conversation we were having was about appropriation and representation, and the class was almost all white women. And honestly, I felt like I couldn't speak in that class, so I just sat in the back and took my notes. But I will never forget how these white girls in my class were like, Jasmine is my spirit animal, and Mulan is such good representation. Like, of course you think that. These movies were made by white people for white people. Aladdin's voice cast is probably the most egregious and the most white, as both of the two main characters are voiced by white people. Pocahontas and Mulan did do a little better as far as voice cast went, but there are still prominent amounts of white people in these movies, and to find out which characters were voiced by white people in Mulan, go to the video I made here. And white people fetishizing Asian cultures, either Disney doing it or the people who watch the movies doing it, goes back a long time, and I'm not going to give you a history lesson, but just know that the West sees the East as backwards, oppressive, and mysterious, and also exotic. And either surprisingly or unsurprisingly, this fetishization of the other Disney princesses or the Disney princesses of color doesn't really encompass all of them, particularly Tiana, maybe because she's like a frog for the entire movie. And though her being a frog sucks, and the directors and producers of The Princess and the Frog were all white, not surprisingly, I guess it is good that white people don't feel as though that they have ownership over her. But do let me know if there is a white Disney fandom of Tiana and they like dressing up as her and calling her great representation. Just let me know, because that would be interesting. And Moana, who is, I guess, the most recent Disney princess of color, the movie is a bit better because they are trying to be more respectful to the culture they represent. They're more self-aware, there's more people behind the scenes, but it is still, in the end, a Disney movie made for white people. I know for a fact that white people just love Moana, and that's because it's just a really good movie, and also because there's no white people. It's pre-colonial era, so white people who are watching the movie are absolved of any guilt that they might feel. The Princess and the Frog did have white people in it, and of course they're the good white people, the rich and benevolent ones that I guess are trying to help lift Tiana out of poverty, but there are some bad white people in it too, but mostly they're portrayed as good, and they're at least a surrogate to the white people who are like, well, I'm not that kind of white person. And the same thing also happens with Pocahontas. They have the good white people and the bad ones, and the bad ones are just depicted as so evil that white people would never see themselves in that character. And of course, to give these poor white women in my class credit, they did recognize that Pocahontas was more adultified and also more sexualized than the other princesses in the lineup, specifically compared to the white princesses. And the same thing happened with Jasmine. They also did realize, at least, that Jasmine and Pocahontas were way more sexualized than the other Disney princesses that were white. No one mentioned Esmeralda, probably because she's not a princess, and also because the people in this class probably hadn't seen The Hunchback of Notre Dame for a while. But in all, to me, it seems as though the princesses that most resonate with white audiences are Mulan, Jasmine, and Moana, because there are no white people in those movies. White audiences fully have to identify with the people of color on screen, and that's not a bad thing. I actually think that's good, but sometimes it goes a little bit too far. White adult women probably shouldn't be dressing up as Jasmine, even though, very ironically, she was inspired by Jennifer Connelly, because that makes perfect sense. I don't want to be a total downer and be like, these movies are bad, and they shouldn't exist, and it's bad representation, because honestly, it is representation, it's just a whitewashed version of it. And this of course makes sense because these movies are made to appeal to a white audience, and they're also made by white people, mostly white directors, producers, casting agents, artists, etc. And them being more whitewashed in order to be more palatable to white people sucks, but we shouldn't ignore that it does at least spark an interest in these cultures, and that's not bad, but unfortunately this learning about the other culture or the other cultures doesn't really go beyond just standing these movies and princesses as adults as girl bosses, especially with the new live action remakes, and also just using these princesses and your love for them as a shield for being not racist, because Mulan was my favorite Disney princess as a kid and I love that movie. And then it's like, of course you do. These movies were made for you by people like you. I didn't say anything in that college class that day, but it did make me think if Mulan even represented me, and if Mulan was even good representation. So part 2, thoughts on Mulan 1998. I, like many kids, loved Mulan growing up. The songs are awesome, and as a kid, it was empowering to see Mulan just do her thing. And of course, it's just a nice feel-good movie. I even dressed up as Mulan twice as a kid. However, as I got older, it started to not hold up as much compared to the other Disney princess films, mainly the white ones. In my opinion, Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid are a lot more compelling story-wise and conflict-wise. And I do think that it's important to note that I only watched Beauty and the Beast for like the first time when I was in college. Though not all of the songs hit bullseyes like Mulan songs, which still of course slap, the Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid are just a lot more memorable. The stories are more memorable, the settings are more memorable, and also both of the love stories are just very, very good. Even though Mulan had a budget of $90 million compared to The Little Mermaid's $40 million budget, you can just tell that The Little Mermaid had so much more love put into it. Especially since the movie was basically banking on The Little Mermaid to do well in order to bring Disney back into the public consciousness as a powerhouse of animation. Mulan and all just feels very generic and bland, and has an even blander villain and an even more boring love story. Mulan herself is of course that typical clumsy girl who doesn't know who she is yet, and that's, a common trait that Disney princesses have, but she also has no interests or talents before joining the military. And later she does become good at the army because that is the military's purpose, to turn civilians into soldiers. And yeah, I guess you can attribute that to her hard work and dedication because she doesn't give up, but I don't know. The movie shows her as smarter than men when playing a board game, but she's not smart enough or studious enough to impress the matchmaker. And to me this makes no sense because it seems as though Mulan would honestly just be good at anything if she just tried a little harder. But I guess no, she actually needs the army to straighten her out. I guess what I'm saying is that Mulan is basically military propaganda. And yeah, she wants to bring her family honor and she loves her family, but is that even like a personality trait that even makes her unique compared to the other Disney princesses in the lineup? I don't think so. In all, Mulan is just a very bland character. She does make bold choices, but it also seems as though she's just going where the plot needs her to be. And I know because I said that I love the whiter movies, for example, the Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid, people are going to call me out and say that I'm a self-hating Asian American woman who has internalized racism. And I will concede, yeah, that's kind of true. I made a whole video about how, yeah, sometimes I wish I was white. However, since making that video, I have come to appreciate who I am more and more each day. And being conscious of internalized racism does make it easier to fight against. Also, you'll just never be able to convince me that Mulan is better than Beauty and the Beast. Also, you just cannot compare these movies as far as animation, storytelling, setting, and overall ambiance. Like, these movies are on two different levels. As far as if I feel represented by Mulan, I would say that yeah, I do. I think that the movie illustrates the Asian American struggle very well. Needing to accept who you are, needing to accept the ways that you're different, and of course not being ashamed of yourself. Do what's right and not what's expected of you. These are age-old themes in Asian American lit, from Lisa See to Amy Tan. These are lessons that Asian American characters, specifically women, are taught over and over again. And to be honest, nowadays, they're just kind of boring. I'm really tired of seeing Asian American stories that center on accepting yourself and realizing your full potential. I'd much rather see a story of a self-actualized woman who just does her thing and doesn't have any identity issues bogging her down. And I think that Hustlers did a great job at this. And though I think that this inevitably makes Mulan a boring watch today, I do have to appreciate that it was made with Asian Americans in mind. So, part 3, Mulan 2020. The original Mulan wasn't made to cater to Chinese audiences, but rather white Americans and Asian Americans. And I think that's awesome because Asian Americans really don't get a lot of media. But it's very obvious that Mulan 2020 is made for Chinese audiences, even though it might not bring in the box office numbers that are hoped for. According to Forbes, no Hollywood movie besides Hobbs and Shaw really did numbers in China, and that was like in 2019. China's domestic movie industry is doing really well right now, so who knows if this Hollywood movie, this Mulan reboot, will captivate Chinese audiences. However, in the article, I do think that it's unfair that the author compared, the potential success of Mulan to The Farewell and Crazy Rich Asians, which were Asian American stories. But anyway, from the trailer and lack of songs, we can see that Disney is really taking Mulan's success in China very seriously, especially from the seemingly large battle sequences that they'll have and the intense CGI effects. They're pulling out all the stops and are trying to do what seems to work really well in China, CGI effects and a lot of action sequences. Whether these are the right decisions, we'll have to find out because it doesn't come out in China until this Friday. As for Mulan 2020 being a representation moment for me, it really isn't. Part of what killed me was Christina Aguilera's cover of Reflection. Like, is this what Disney thinks that Mulan fans want? I guess it's what the white fans want, but not the Asian American ones, at least not me. I'm really surprised that Disney isn't trying to cater more towards Asian American audiences, the ones that originally came out for this movie and felt represented by it. I honestly have no interest in seeing Mulan 2020, especially since as an adult I don't really like the animated one besides the songs, and the songs are apparently going to be missing from this one, or sung by white people, like, I don't know. Though Mulan does boast some Asian American actors like Tsai Ma, it really is just chock full of actors from China, and that's fine. But this is just another example that shows clearly that this movie is made for overseas audiences and not for people like me. That doesn't mean that Asian American people can't enjoy this movie, but just that, I don't think that it really is the Asian American representation that I need. Especially since the director of this movie is a white woman, like, God. But you know what? If people in China really like this movie, I'm happy for them. And I'll probably end up watching this movie like a year from now, like I usually do with all of the Disney remakes. I've surprisingly seen all of the Disney remakes just by happenstance on TV, usually months and sometimes even a year after they've come out. So I'll probably end up catching this movie sometime in the future, but as far as watching it with intent, I don't think so. So, part 4, Raya the Last Dragon. There's this animated Disney movie coming out, I guess soon, and it's supposed to be another Asian American representation moment or Asian representation moment, and it's fine, I guess. They cast Kelly Marie Tran as the lead and titular character, even though she wasn't their first choice, and of course, I guess Awkwafina is going to be in it, like... It seems fine, but I'm just so sick of Asian movies being set in fantasy worlds. I think the last Disney movie to star Asian people in a non-fantasy setting was Big Hero 6, which, though isn't a great movie, does still have awesome Asian American representation. They did also do the short Bao, which was questionable at best and internalized racism at its worst. I mean, those character designs, like, come on. But at least there weren't any dragons, magic, or spells, just Asian people living their lives, and that's all really I want to see. I don't need myths, and I don't want throwback sitcoms. All I want to see are just Asian people hanging out in present day. I want Asian American adoptee representation and the baggage that comes with that. But it seems as though Hollywood can only fit in Asian faces if it's in a fantasy world. So part 5, the post-racial days of the early 2000s. There was this time in Hollywood during the 90s and early 2000s where Black and Asian people were cast alongside each other. This happened most obviously in Mulan, with Mulan and Mushu, and again in Rush Hour, and again in Romeo Must Die starring Aaliyah and Jet Li. And though unfortunately 2 out of these 3 movies that I mentioned, the Black character played the comedic side character to the main lead, who was Asian, we just don't really see castings like this anymore. The last Black and Asian duo I remember seeing on TV was in Hannah Montana, and they were the bullies, the only people of color in the school bullying the poor white kids. We just don't get minority-led TV shows and movies that don't have at least one visibly white person. Even Grownish had to include that one white friend. One recent example where I guess there wasn't a white person was The Sun Is Also a Star, starring Yara Shahidi and Charles Melton. But I did hear that Charles Melton was miscast for this role because in the book, the character has 2 Korean parents, and Charles Melton, as we all know, is half white. And of course they gave John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran the shaft in the Disney Star Wars reboot. Or new trilogy, sorry. Such diversity, very representation. I hope that in the future we can see more minority-led films and relationships and friendships that don't have to include white people, but we'll just have to wait and see. So the conclusion. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on Mulan and Mulan 2020 and the other Disney princesses and where we're heading as far as diversity in Hollywood. I do think that things are getting better, and hopefully in the future we can see more minority-led stories. If you like this video, please give it a like, comment down below, share it with someone, and of course subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when I post my next video. I'll be posting my next video on Tuesday, and it's going to be about whitewashing in Hollywood. So if you want to see that one, please subscribe and ring the bell to be notified. And thank you so much to my subscribers and my patrons for supporting this channel, and I'll see you all Tuesday. Thanks for watching.